All right, guys, welcome to week 11 of the Market Makers Weekly Mastermind. Today, we're going to back up and unpack how we get creative finance offers accepted from sellers, because a lot of us are making offers on market properties, which means there's a listing agent in place, and we have to get past that gatekeeper. And if you've been around making subject to offers, or you're a listing agent and you've received subject to offers, here's what you're probably seeing today. You're seeing investors gravitate away language related to subject to. Are you guys seeing this? They're literally subject to offers, but they've taken the word subject to completely out of the offer, and they're recrafting how that's coming across because they're having such a hard time getting past these gatekeepers, these listing agents, right?
Their community is also taking that word out.
Oh, they are. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that who was it? Peter Drucker says nothing's more useless than doing a thing well that shouldn't be done at all. That's how we feel about subject to transactions in general, right? So why get really good at recrafting what you call it when it's a structure that maybe we shouldn't be doing at all anyway? So when we're talking to sellers, I just literally had, excuse me, 2 consults this morning with listing agents with sellers who have had their properties on the market for a while. They don't want to take more price reductions. And so if you think about it from a seller's perspective, or even as a listing agent perspective, what's your advice to a seller? There's only 2 things you can do, right, to make it more appealing and get that property sold. Either you throw money at it, and the seller's wondering, if I throw money at it, assuming they even have the money to throw at that property to make it nicer or improve it. Question then becomes, am I going to get at least that back at closing, which in a lot of cases you're not, or we take a price reduction. Either way, it's costing them money. So an alternative to them taking price reductions and then it costing them money to get their property sold, why don't we just make it more attractive on terms? And if you don't need more of your equity than would come in the form of a down payment, then there's really nothing restricting you from doing owner financing and turning your equity and or that low interest loan into a very passive cash flow stream. And now the buyers are on the hook for maintenance repairs. So we are talking to sellers all day long about these constructs. And then what ends up happening is they get all these subject to offers, and the listing agents are sending them to us. And now we're helping them either counter those offers and or offer a different structure, assuming the offer comes with the down payment, the interest rate, and the terms that the seller's agreeable to. We then counter with a different structure that makes it more bulletproof for the sellers, right? So what we're going to do today is, last week we had talked about a case study of a deal that, remember, a good way to invest would be to go to the bank, get a traditional loan. Today, you'd have to probably put 50, 60, 80% down, depending on your market, based on today's prices and today's rent rates, to make that deal pencil. Then you're going to put a 12-month tenant in place and do a long-term lease. And over the long term, with tax benefits, principal reduction on the loan, with appreciation on that property and maybe some cash flow, you do really well when you combine all of that, right? But a better way to invest, because there's an acquisition strategy and there's a income strategy, would be to do creative financing, save money on a down payment so you can gear your return up, lower your interest rate to make a smaller monthly payment, increase your cash flow. And then on the income strategy, you do a 12-month lease, a long-term rental. Even better way to do that would be, let's piggyback on that previous acquisition strategy. Let's go to the bank. Let's avoid the bank, sideline the banks, structure financing with the seller, smaller down payment, smaller monthly payment, better rates. And then we're going to do an income strategy that makes a lot more money than a 12-month lease. It used to be the short-term rental. We all know, how many of you are dealing with short-term rentals right now, and that tide went out and now the sellers are in some serious pain? Anybody dealing with any of those? Got those listings? Yeah, it's kind of a bloodbath, especially here in Central Florida. So we're seeing a lot of investors do co-living rentals or pad splits. So last week we talked about a case study of incredible creative finance terms that the buyer was able to achieve with this purchase. They're doing a co-living rental and turning a 3-bedroom, 3-bath house into 6 rentable units with those 3 bathrooms. And now they go from $1,800 a month of gross income to, I think it was $5,600, $5,700 a month of gross income. So, and they're piggybacking on a principal only loan payment of only $1,370 a month, all of which is going to bring the principal down for them to build equity over the next, I think it's 5-year term, exponential equity building because of that principal only payment that they have. So we talked about that case study last week. Anybody download the co-living cash flow calculator? If you don't have a way to do the financial due diligence and basically crunch the numbers on a co-living rental, the cash flow calculator we texted you earlier, you can download that and plug and play with that. And that's specifically designed for pad split properties, by the way. So it has the pad split fee in there, which is the 8% fee that they take. And then it has the placement fee, which is the first 10 days that they take as well. And then you can put in your debt assumptions and everything. So that's what we broke down last week. Got a couple questions about backing up now. So how do we find those kinds of properties? So today we're going to talk brass tacks about probably the most valuable part of building wealth in real estate, especially as it relates to co-living rentals that you're going to do creative financing with, is how do we get those properties today? So before I just jump in and start talking on that, and Chad adds his input to that, I want to open it up for everybody. How are you, Carol? Because I know you're out there in the trenches buying deals. How are you positioning your offers? Walk me through the process of how you have initial conversation. Are you going after off market or on market? And then when you're having that initial conversation with either the listing agent or the seller directly, how does that conversation go? And then what does the offer look like? Are you doing a written contract? Are you sending an email? Are you sending a letter of intent? Walk us through that the way you're doing it. And Carol, by the way, introduce yourself, Carol, because people don't know what you do.
Yeah, I'm Carol Margolis. My company is called Offer Florida. I am not an agent. I am an investor. So I do a lot of wholesaling of transactions, but I'm looking to purchase more for myself as well. So really wherever the numbers work.
By the way, can I interrupt? Carol also, I don't know if you're going to talk about it, but she runs the Real Estate Women's Investment Network in Central Florida as well.
Yep. I've got a crew of a lot of women all throughout Central Florida, in fact, nationwide, but that I'm involved in, but primarily here in Central Florida, that are flipping, lending, wholesaling, agents, the gamut. And so I've been doing this. I think I'm going on year 4 now. This is my second career, second and final career. Anyway, so yeah, my company is me and 4 other women. We're based downtown Orlando, and we get our leads we do off market and on market. We're pretty much 50-50. And our off market leads are almost all canceled, expired listings for sale by owners, for rent by owners. Because so many people have not sold their properties, they're getting so desperate, they're renting. So those are a lot of our leads. Those are perfect lease option or creative finance leads because they're really motivated. I was only doing cash offers before, and most homes are pretty homes and they don't warrant a cash offer. So I have, over the last few years, learned all the creative strategies. To some extent, I'm not an expert in any, and that's why I'm on this call. I want to soak up everything in John's brain. But we are always approaching sellers to say, if it's a beautiful home, we're like, hey, are you open if we can pay your asking price, pay all closing costs, are you open to terms? And we're trying to just get an answer. Like, what do you mean by terms? Because most people don't understand it. We also do that with agents. For our agent outreach, we have them in a nurture campaign. Every few weeks, agents throughout the state are getting messages from us, emails, text messages, calls, and looking for fixer-uppers. But we also tell them that we do a lot of lease options, we do a lot of terms offers, and because most of what they send us are pretty houses. And so we'll say, hey, this is a beautiful home. I'm sure it's going to sell quickly. But if your seller is open to exploring what a terms offer may look like, let's talk. 90% of them say, no, my seller's not interested. when that agent most likely has no clue what we're even talking about or has not even approached their seller about it. So we just want to get the conversation going and actually, John, I've been talking a lot with Christine lately that you work with. And we're actually going to do a webinar for some sellers in a few weeks to kind of just do a no obligation, just kind of an informative kind of what's seller financing all about.
That's awesome.
And when we do off market, we are sending an automatic like letter of intent memorandum. And it pulls data from public, like Property Radar, where it has their mortgage balance and it has their about their monthly payment, their taxes, and it sends them the appropriate seller finance opportunity that may work for them. So if they're fully paid off, it'll send them a seller finance letter of intent. If they have a mortgage, it'll send them a lease option. We don't use the subject to word pretty much anymore. We've been doing more of the seller finance, the wrap mortgages, but and so it sends them an initial LOI. And again, we're just trying to get them on the phone to book a conversation. And so I had a husband and wife say yes this morning, both to a lease option and working with investor agent on a seller finance rep situation, because they owe pretty much most of what the home is worth. They've taken all their equity out of it to build another home, and they are desperate to sell, and it's a beautiful home. And so the numbers work both for a wrap as well as lease option. And so we may even just dual market it both ways and see who we can get a buyer first.
That's interesting, Carol. Chad's a master with lease options. And for you to know what's in my head's not going to take very long. Chad's head, that's another story. What are you doing with your lease options?
Trying to find tenant buyers. So, that's a whole nother marketing campaign, trying to find qualified tenant buyers. I would love to stay in the deal. My goal is to stay in every lease option and sublease it out and have that monthly spread. But the numbers have been so tight lately. If we're trying to request, and Chad, I would love to talk with you more on this. If we're setting a lease price at market rent or even a little higher for that tenant buyer, there's really not room, or at least maybe it's my mindset, there's not room for us to lease it at $2,500 and sublease it for like $2,800.
It's really hard in this part of the market cycle, and I don't know where you believe we are. I believe we're in phase 4. We're in the recession part of the 18-year real estate cycle, which unfortunately is the most dangerous part of the cycle to run a lease option strategy, because you got rents compressing, credit loss going, and vacancy going up. And we're in economic contraction from a macro standpoint. The other thing that really worries me in this part of the cycle is if they exercise their option and the appraisal comes in too low, you've got to make sure you have clauses to address that, especially if you're staying in as a sandwich lease option, because you could be creating future liability for yourself if rents compress or prices drop, and it's very likely right now. So it's a dangerous strategy in this part of the cycle. Probably in 27 or 28, it would be my number one go-to. Like, I used it extensively from 2012 through about 14. And then I stepped back from it and went back into different strategies, but it works very well in a rising market when buyers are still sitting on the fence and sellers need to get that payoff when market values fall, and it's a great tool. But right now it's hard to solve for what you just brought up. It's hard to make a spread when you've got rent compression happening, and there's the new, like, both YouTube reporters and the mainstream media is finally waking up to what's actually happening, with your market being one of the epicenters of that. So I like using the JV or trust structure is almost better in any scenario in this part of the market. There's less liability for all parties. So I wouldn't try to make them fit too hard right now. Just understand where you are in the real estate cycle. Probably 2 years from now, I'll have a very different opinion on this.
So yeah, to piggyback on that, Carol, I know a lot of the the advice that we're giving listing agents right now. So I'm wearing my agent hat right now, right? The advice we're giving to listing agents, because they get these creative finance offers and they just discard them. Like you said, 90% of them just say, no, my client's not interested. Their default mode, like an attorney who doesn't understand something, is going to be no. So what we're advising them to do is, look, there actually, some of these are legitimate offers that will net your seller more money in total and potentially allow them to arbitrage the value of that capital they have locked up for an unprecedented another 25 years, right? At the super low interest rate. Why not take advantage of that diamond in their backyard? So instead of you just defaulting to no and trashing that offer, whether you present it or not to the seller, most of them, if they present it, it'll be, oh, I got this offer and it was a creative finance offer and I told them no on your behalf, right? So they have to present everything to the sellers. One tactic that you want to include is to be the voice of the offer. In other words, instead of relying on the agent to present or relay your offer and mess it up or not show it in its best light and not even know how to present the benefits of it, I always do a Loom video of me walking through the offer on, and so whether they see my face on the Zoom video, or I'm sorry, the Loom video, or it's just a screen capture, they hear my voice, right? And that does two things. Number one, it's sharing the benefits of that offer and the protections. I always throw in what's called a baby negative, and I'll talk about that in a second, right? So it's them hearing me present the offer in my voice. So that's the buyer. Now you're this human being on the other side of this transaction. It's not just this arbitrary investor who does shady stuff, right?
Yeah.
So you can hear my voice. Yeah, and then they get to hear a proper presentation of the offer and the protections and so forth right there in a 5-minute video, right? So that is, and then you just throw the link right in there. And by the way, I just threw in the chat what my email looks like when I send that to listing agents. It's just a rock in a shoe. I'm trying to create a pebble in a shoe to make somebody curious enough to want to spend more time on a Zoom call or something, or a phone conversation. So you can download that link, and it's just what I typically would do. We're going to give that away. I'm going to put our logo on it and dress it up nicer. But that's an example of what my email looks like. And that's all I want to do. I don't want to explain the offer. I just want to create curiosity for a follow-up conversation. I think a lot of investors are trying to put an offer out there in that email, whether it's an LOI, it's a formal written offer, or it's even a verbal. They're trying to sell it on that one touch, where what we're trying to do is just put a rock in the shoe, create some curiosity, and then have a follow-up conversation where we can properly present that when it comes to the numbers, the total benefit, and the protections.
I had an idea resurface from the past. Carol, I like what you're doing, sending the letter of intent. Something that helped me so I used to target Craigslist for rent by owner. A lot of them would end up being listed as well. A trick that I used that got offers or letters of intent in front of sellers, similar to what John's saying, but a more analog version. I actually had a seller and agent acknowledgement form. And by making like an official form, and people like licensees are so conditioned to, follow the code of ethics and to get the paperwork done right. It had no legal bearing whatsoever. But I would present it as a cover letter to the offer, and at the bottom it would have a checkbox of like, I acknowledge that I have read and understand this, and then they would sign it. You wouldn't believe how many of those actually come back to you. And it's the agent feels an obligation to get the seller's signature, because they're like, oh my God, did I miss something in ethics class? Do I have to get this signed? So not to look ignorant in front of their client or their broker, they just go ahead and get it signed. So I know that I've put the real estate professional in a position where they feel an obligation to present my offer, even if they have already talked to the seller and they said, we don't want these low cash offers, or we don't want these creative finance offers. But that's something I did very successfully. And you wouldn't believe, like, the agents will follow up and be like, hey, I'll have that form back to you in a few hours. I talked to the seller, like they'll come back to you. So the Loom video is a good idea. It's a little more modern, but that like seller and agent acknowledgement cover letter was a great idea in my business.
I love both of these ideas.
The other thing when it comes to presenting, who was it that said, if you don't tell somebody what the product won't do, they won't believe everything you throw up on them about what it will do, right? As far as the benefits. So when I mentioned a baby negative, there's a story about when I sold a car one time, and I had a button on the radio that was sticking. Like it was one of the presets. Remember the radios used to have the radio station presets on them? If you remember those.
Like live button.
McKenna wouldn't know what we're talking about right now. So yeah, they had the radio station. There was always 6 of them or so, right? And one of them didn't work. So when I was selling my car, I made it a point to tell them, and I didn't know what I was doing then, but I just said, hey, because I just, out of my spirit, I didn't want them to buy the car and then find that out later, as little as that was. I just told them, look, I need to show you something that's broken on this. It's this button for the preset for this radio station. It sticks and this one doesn't work. So don't put anything on that preset, right? And so it was such a minor thing though, but what it showed them was that, okay, if there was anything else that's wrong, it would have been disclosed. And now I believe everything else that he says on the positive side, right? Because we always try to let everybody know all, how warm and fluffy this thing is, but then we never tell them the negative. So a lot of times when I'm talking to an owner and they're asking me, well, they always want to know the worst case scenario. So I just volunteer it. I mean, everybody on this phone call would want to know that, right? When we make a decision, what's the worst case scenario? Can I be okay with that? And yeah, I'm good. So they'll say something like, well, what if they default on the loan? I'll say, here's the worst case scenario is you sell the house for $500,000, you take a down payment of $50,000, and their dog ruins the place, and you have $70,000 in renovations, and you have to take them to court and foreclose on them, and now you're out of pocket, and you got to get this thing back on the market. That's like the worst case scenario. And I just let them sit on it. They're horrified. But I tell them, but here's how we de-risk that, right? We de-risk that by getting more money up front, more skin in the game, and we don't give them the deed at closing. That's why we put it in a trust and we lockbox it so you have ultimate protection. Now, if they default and we're in a judicial foreclosure state, you don't have to take them to court and spend 1.5 years in court trying to get your title back while you're paying the property taxes. I said, so
story selling is really good there too, to interject. Like if you have past deals, which I know, a lot of you do. I had the worst one I ever had was this poor guy was like 22 years old. He moved in, put about $25,000 in CapEx into the property. It was beautiful. I mean, he did new flooring, new paint, up like 2 stories worth of decks. And then he lost his job. His girlfriend left with a newborn. His girlfriend left and took the baby all in like a 2-day period. And he just mentally shut down. And he walked away and left that place. He would not return anyone's phone calls. He wouldn't come to the door. He left it, broom swept, like occupant ready. And that was my worst scenario ever that I had a seller had to go through. Well, what we do? We just reran the strategy and the seller ended up making a ton more money. So I also find like use stories of your worst case scenarios once you gain some experience and you've got some deal flow. And that one deal going sideways helped me close so many others because I'm like, well, this is how bad it gets. And they're like, wait a minute, didn't he make an extra like 50 grand? I'm like, yeah, it's pretty bad, right? And they're like, okay, let's do it. So don't ever forget to lead with stories too in your presentation. Like it's powerful.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think sometimes we're too warm and fluffy about it, and then they just don't believe us because we're salespeople. So it's when you get real with somebody and show them what it won't do. And most of y'all do that naturally anyway, right? Because a lot of us aren't salespeople that way. Yeah. So coming back when we're presenting this option, another really important point is to really emphasize, you notice in that email, I emphasize the total money in pocket. So you might have heard me say this before. If you didn't hear that, instead of talking about the price as the beginning of the conversation, because we always typically will say, hey, we're going to pay, here's the terms, here's the price, here's how much you get up front at closing, and then we finance the balance with this payment structure over time. And then I refinance you out in 5 years, whatever the balloon is, if you include that in there, right? Rather than talking about the price and then breaking everything down from there, I always start with the total benefit. So the total benefit are the 3 C's, so the 3 buckets of cash that they get. You want to add all of that up. So the total benefit that you always open up on these conversations with is the total money that the seller is going to receive over time. So that's the down payment. That's the first C. The second C is going to be their total monthly payments. So if you're doing a 5-year balloon and that payment turns into, say, a $2,000 monthly payment, take 2,000 times 60 months, and then boom, there is the second C. And then the third C is that loan balance that you pay off on the back end. So at the end of your balloon period, there's going to be an amount due. That number on the amortization schedule is the third C. So I'll demonstrate here real quick for you. This is our owner finance wrap calculator that if you don't have this, by the way, you can, we can find the link where we were giving this away. So when I calculate those 3 C's, it's as simple as this. So on this particular calculator right here, we have a property that's being sold for $400,000. We're going to put 5% down. That's usually my offer amount. I don't want to be more than about 10% total cash to close. That's just me personally. So if I'm going to be 10% total cash to close, maybe 3 to 5% is going to be closing costs, trust structure, all that. Maybe an agent referral fee or a listing agent commission. And then the other 5% is going to be cash to the seller. That's just my personal formula, right? Leaves enough room in there in case I want to assign or wholesale that structure to somebody else, and then buyer or another investor. But in this instance, we have the 5% down, which is 20 grand on a $400,000 property. That leaves a loan at 380,000. If we amortize that over a 30-year term at a 4% rate, that creates a payment of $1,800 a month. When we calculate these 3 C's, it's as simple as, number one, the down payment, if you guys want to write this down, is $20,000. So there's the first C. By the way, a traditional sale, let's take commissions and closing costs aside for a second so we can just do apples to apples comparison. A traditional sale is going to be $400,000 in their pocket, right? So if we draw a line down a piece of paper and write traditional sale on one side, $400,000. Again, commission, closing costs aside for a second. On an owner finance transaction, they get the 3 C's. We put those 3 C's on the other side. You got 20,000 up front. What do we make in the middle? If you click on the second tab here for the amortization schedule, here's the total in payments, right? If we do a 60-month term or 5-year balloon, they're going to make a total over that period $109,000 in payments. So on the second C, put 109,000. So 20,000 first C, 109,000 second C, and then what's the balance when we pay it off on the back end? 343. So you take the 343,000, that's a loan balance on the back end, plus the 109,000 in payments they make in the middle. That's the sandwich, the meat in the middle, and then the 20,000 on the front end. What's the number we get from that? 343, 353, 453, 462, 462,000 they make in total with my owner finance offer compared to if they did a traditional sale. Commissions and closing costs are going to be the same on both sides, right? So for an apples to apples comparison, look, you can do a traditional sale, assuming you could even sell it for 400,000, which that's a big question mark, isn't it? Because you're typically talking to people, if you're going to make owner finance offers on market properties, it's properties that have been on the market for 100 days or more, ideally. So assuming you could even sell it for 400,000 and you don't have to do more price reductions, that's the money you make, 400 grand minus commissions and closing costs. Alternatively, we can get you 462,000. You see what I just did? Now I got their attention. That's how we frame our conversation. And here's how I arrive at the 462,000. And by the way, this works with the property that's paid off, and it works with the property that has an underlying loan. Instead of me going out there and relying on my data source that can only show me what the originally recorded mortgage was, and the interest rate's wrong half the time on those data sources, right? Instead of me making any assumptions about what they still owe on it, I'm just going to assume the property's paid off. Because remember, I'm not trying to get this accepted. I'm trying to get a conversation going with them. So I'm going to hit them in between the eyes with that 462,000. Here's what I can do for you. Get you 462,000. Here's how I arrive at that 462. Now I talk price. 400 sale price, 20,000 in your pocket up front, $109,000 in payments over the next 60 months, and then a balloon payment on the back end of X. That totals, with the line underneath it, $462,000. And then I have an asterisk underneath it, if there's an underlying loan, because this is how a loan wrap works, right? Or if you do a second, here's how it works. If you have an underlying loan, that monthly payment and that loan will be deducted from the payment, from this 462. That's essentially what a loan wrap is. So the underlying debts subtracted from that number. We can talk those details later. Again, I'm not trying to sell my offer on that first touch. I'm trying to get them curious and interested in having another conversation where I can then break down the specifics of that offer, right? Whether you do a loan wrap or you do a second for their equity, the portion of their equity that you're not going to give them in the form of a down payment. So that's how we kind of frame that conversation with them. And then, by the way, when we're talking to a seller or a listing agent about owner financing, how do you bring up potentially a creative finance terms without using the word? Because terms is a good non-threatening way, Carol. It piques some curiosity. Maybe they don't know what it is, but they don't have any negative connotations a lot of times to terms, right? Until we start using it a lot, and then they're going to just like subject to. But here's how I say it very simply. I say, here's what I propose. I can get you 462,000 total, got their attention. Remember, you got to frame for that. You got to frame what your solution is before you say the solution. The frame's more important than the solution. So the frame I always open up with is, this property's been on the market for 100 days, 120 days. Instead of you potentially having an expired listing and doing all this work for nothing and paying for these professional photos and doing all these open houses for nothing, how about we get you a commission on this in the next 30 days and we net your seller more money in total, because I can get them 462,000. You see what I just did? Now we got the frame. The ground's fertile for me to drop this solution or see it into. And so I'll get you 462,000. We get it closed in 30 days, and I'm going to buy it as is, so you don't have to worry about anything blowing up during the inspection period. And then what we do is we present the actual solution, 460,000 in pocket. But here's what we're proposing. If your seller's open to getting their list price and a down payment, and then taking payments for the balance of the sale price over time, then I can net them a total of $462,000. So that is another way of approaching the owner finance conversation without saying subject to, without saying anything that they don't understand. It's very elementary school language. It's, I can get them the list price without them taking more price reductions. So you have an expired listing potentially, and they'll take initial down payment. The balance of the sale price will give them payments over time. I didn't have to talk about interest rates, didn't have to talk about a wrap, didn't have to talk about sub two, taking over a loan. If they're open to that, then let's have a conversation. I'll show you the specifics. And the specifics are three things: the numbers, the protections, and the process. Numbers, protections, and the process. And that's what we cover on the second conversation. By the way, speaking of process, if we can future pace, if you guys don't know what future pacing is how we sell a lot of these. The future pacing, when you're talking about the process, is what gets them into the future. So there's a book. Have you guys ever read the book Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz? Anybody read that book? So good. You've probably heard about the experiment that they highlighted in that book. It was with basketball players. They took 3 groups of college students and they measured their results shooting free throws from the free throw line, how many baskets they can sink from the free throw line. And the first group was a control group. They measured them, they baselined everybody, and then in 30 days, they measured their results again on the free throw line. So the first group was a control group. They didn't do anything during the 30 days. They took their test in the beginning, assessed how many baskets they sunk, and then they tested them at the end of the 30 days, and they got 0% better. The second group practiced every single day, and they got 26% better at the end of the experiment. The third group got their results baselined, didn't touch a basketball for 30 days, but they went through visualization exercises as if they were shooting baskets and practicing, and if they missed, they do their routine, make appropriate adjustments, swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. So they were training their nervous system, but not physically touching a basketball. And they interestingly got 24% better, while the group that was physically practicing got 26% better. And they never touched a basketball, the second group, right? They just visualized. The point there is that they had synthetic repetitions. in their imaginations that train their nervous system to get 24% better. So how do you train the nervous system of somebody that you're selling that synthetic repetition of going into the future and getting this result? Is you walk them through the process. So the way we close that conversation, and closing's overrated, but this is a very easy way to close a conversation and get the seller to jump on board with you, is you walk them through what that process looks like. So that conversation, as we wrap up at the end, it's like, look, remember, I go back to that frame. If you don't want to take more price reduction, because I start with the motivation, then I go to the solution. Start with motivation, then go to solution. So at the end of the conversation now, we went through the particulars and the numbers and the steps and the protections. So if we want to sell the property, you want to net the $460,000 in total, minus your mortgage, your existing debt, then here's what the next steps would be. We're going to produce a purchase agreement. It's 3 pages long. We'll send that to you. We'll both sign it. That'll start the inspection period. In the next, say, 7 days, I'll have my inspector come and look at the property, or maybe you don't even have an inspection because you already saw it. But then we're going to have about 10 days for the title company to do all the title searches and prep the deed. We're going to have the trustee produce the trust documents. And then on that 10th day, we're going to coordinate with you a mobile notary to meet you wherever is convenient for you. So you don't have to come into the office. You just have to have your ID with you. You see what I'm doing? I'm installing a synthetic repetition in their mind about the future. So this is a reality now that I'm creating for them by just simply walking them through what that next step would be, assuming we can come to terms and you want to take this as the option. You're out on this property, right? And so the baby negative, so this is just sales. We're just talking some sales tactics here, right? The baby negative, the acknowledgement form that Chad talked about, starting with the 3C total as opposed to price, always framing the conversation with the benefit to the audience. So in the case of a listing agent, not having an expired listing, not doing all that work for nothing, not having professional photos and the money you invested for flyers and photography go down the drain, and you getting to the closing table in the next 30 days instead of having to have that another tough conversation with the seller about a price reduction, us getting this done and then go into your solution. So frame first, solution second, and then future pacing the listing agent and or the seller with that future reality that you can install in their nervous system by just walking them through what the logistics and the steps are, is how we get these wrapped up. Any questions? Anything to add? Anybody doing something that can piggyback on that? That's a really cool anecdotal tactic.
John, I have a situation now where I have a listing. It's been on the market for about 2.5 months, almost 3. And the seller has a VA loan for $400,000. The asking price is $600,000. And he's already getting desperate. Would this technique work for him? Like wrap the $400,000? It's a very low interest rate loan at 3.62, which is great. But it has to be covered by assumed by another veteran.
Well,
It's not necessarily true. It just has to be approved. If you want to go the legal route, it needs to be approved by a VA underwriter, but they don't have to have a VA certificate.
yeah, you can assume a VA loan without qualifying for a VA loan, in other words.
And I
Alternatively,
think, what is it, John? A 740 score and a like less than a 43 DTI, I think. As long as they meet the requirements, you don't have to have VA eligibility.
that's a
So
good
it could
question.
be anyone, you mean?
Yeah, it can be anybody.
Yeah, it has to go through a VA underwriter to follow their
Guidelines.
formal assumption process. But the assumee does not have to have VA eligibility.
Mm-hmm.
They'll go through the loan servicer to qualify. So you have to go with the loan servicer on the mortgage statement and ask them what are the qualifications for a potential borrower to assume this loan. But we've helped people with their trust structures. Like one of the things that I would want to know is what's that seller planning on doing next? So they have $200,000 of equity.
He's moving to Georgia and he wants to buy another property.
Okay. So another question might be, if he's talking to a loan officer, if he's not, link up with the loan officer that does VA loans up there, find out how much his tier 2 eligibility is, meaning how much more of a VA loan can he still finance? In most cases, VA borrower can get another VA loan in place. And we would structure the sale of this house as a loan wrap, keep his existing loan in place. He can own or finance the sale of this property, get enough of a down payment for him to put down on his next purchase, and qualify for a second VA loan, assuming he has that tier 2 eligibility. So you may want to find out.
Especially if he's downgrading, going to a lower price property.
Yeah,
Yeah.
probably he is.
So
Yeah.
find out from a lender where he's going, that he's going to link up with, what his tier 2 eligibility would be. And if that's enough for him to buy his next property, then you can own or finance this property. And what it essentially looks like to that loan officer, the way we structure these, it looks like he rented this one out and then got another VA loan to buy his next house. So we're doing that. We just did that with a VA borrower, and they had tier 2 eligibility. They got enough down on the sale of their current property with the current VA loan in place, and they got another VA loan. And we made the sale of this property so it was safe for him, subject to his loan commitment on his next property. So this closing wasn't going to happen if it was going to hurt him. Right? Does that make sense? So check with his loan servicer if you want to go the assumption route, and if you want to go potentially the loan wrap route, then send me a copy of his recent mortgage statement, and we'll structure what that loan wrap might look like for him.
Okay, great. I'll do that. Thank you.
All right. Fed has been patiently waiting. He has a hand up, John. So Fed, you want to unmute? You still there, Fed?
I did not realize my hand was up.
No.
But
Yeah, I've been feeling bad for 15 minutes. I'm like, we gotta get to
my bad. Apologies. I mean, I'll give you an interesting update just so that we can kind of know all parts of the market. So I'm in LA.
Have you been handing out flyers during riots?
Yeah. See, fortunately, LA is so big that that's super far away from me. It's like
I can see
30
Fed in
minutes
his
away.
nicest suit. Like, doesn't this suck? Or don't you want to move? You should list your house. Take this.
Fed's walking around with his
That too.
iced tea. He's walking around with his iced t-shirt. In LA.
Anyways, very interesting. So we had a meeting at the office yesterday. We were just kind of discussing the west side of LA, which tends to be a little more of the luxury and the ultra high luxury. So to give you an idea, in the last 3 months, there was 4 massive sales. One was $110 million, which sold at full ask. One was at 60 million, which sold at 86% of list. One at 57 mil, which was full ask, and the other one at 51 million, which was 83% of the list price. With that being said, we're noticing in LA that anything that's under 5 million is extremely hot. It's going into multiple offers.
Mhm.
When we jumped in the 5 to 9 million range, it's still warm. It's slightly competitive, but not crazy. And then when you go above the 10, that's where it starts to kind of become a little on the cold side. I thought that was really interesting given what's going on nationwide, and obviously other pockets of LA, because then you have other pockets where I have that listing where we've been in escrow 5 times, the one where we tried to do the creative financing. So it's just really interesting how, to give you an idea, that's a 30-minute drive, but 30-minute drive the other direction, all of a sudden it's almost like 2021.
Yeah, interesting.
I just thought it was really interesting because I didn't expect to see those numbers at all.
What was your expectation?
I mean, with how much agents are freaking out, and I think it's likely due to the media and just everything that we're seeing with NAR. I didn't expect the up to 5 million to be multiple offers. I mean, to give you an idea, so there's things that are listed at 3 3 million that are selling at 3.9.
Wow. What's your FHA loan limit out there? I'm curious.
I believe it's 1.1.
It's insane.
I believe.
That's insane.
So I think it goes back to Fed. I think it was 3 episodes ago when we had the luxury. You remember you were on that episode. You were on that, right?
Yeah.
Luxury.
Yeah.
Like what I pointed out is we've got so much liquidity was put into the into the economy globally, but especially in America, that has trickled up, and there's hardly a better time to have ever served luxury purchasers in any vertical, including real estate. And that trickle up has resulted in whether it was stocks, stocks, bonds, small business, cash flow, like the people who control the assets are doing better than ever, and the lower 50th percent are struggling more than ever. So it's great that you're in that marketplace. What I would ask is, what are you doing to move up the scale to where that demand is?
On the super high, well, I mean, right now, fortunately, I mean, I am working with some clients that are in that ballpark where it's a multiple offer situation. But I wanted to bring it up because I remember, at least what I often use as a gauge to see what's going on with any market or what's about to happen to an economy is when the ultra high net worth individuals, when they stop buying art or toys, and then they kind of put a timeout on purchasing houses. Usually, I mean, in my head, I usually say brace for impact. So it's really interesting seeing, that there's still so many sales. And the reason why I brought up the numbers and the list to sale price ratio is that for some of these super, super high sales, they're even selling at full ask. Whereas a lot of times when it's super high, you'll see a massive delta. You'll see something that's listed, for example, for 50, sell for 32. And then you start asking yourself, well, that was a great valuation from the listing side.
I think there's a couple of things at play. One is the trickle up economics from the QE. The other is the trickle up economics from the baby boomers entering end of life. So you've got $76 trillion in net worth encapsulated in one generation, and they're selling assets. They're passing away. They're going into long-term care. I mean, you know that, like we've looked at those stats, but we're now really starting to see that there's something like 10,000 baby boomers a day retiring, and there's there's 2 million a year passing away. I think it's you've got interesting market dynamics we haven't seen before because of demographics and because of monetary policy. Like, we printed money in 01, but a little bit relative to 2020. We printed a lot in 2008, but not nearly as much as we did in 2020. And it's stayed in the system much longer than I expected, or it's moved around the system differently than I expected. But that's what I would say is consider looking backwards as a risk, because this time it really is a lot different on that end of the spectrum. It's a lot worse on the other end of the spectrum, for the same reasons. But like, how can you attract the sellers who might have the perception you did? They're like, well, I'm not going to take a discount to sell in this environment. Like, how can you capitalize on this? Like, the realization that you have? How do you get those $5 to $7 million listings right now? Get in front of it.
I mean, right now, so at least the firm I'm with, we kind of have a little bit of an unfair advantage because they're actually about to partner with the MLS in July with an app that's owned by the firm called Rubingi, where it's owned by, I think it was launched by an appraiser. And what he does, it's essentially you're able to talk to any client, and it facilitates the conversation, because you can go, let's say you're at an event, and obviously sometimes people hear, oh, I'm a realtor, and they automatically don't want to talk to you, or they say, oh, well, how's the market, right? And then that's kind of some people say, oh, it's great, or it's bad, or blah blah blah, not realizing you kind of need to understand like what they feel, what that person feels about the market, and what they may feel like the property is actually worth. The app that we have, which is going to be available, I think, for all agents as a partnership with the MLS, essentially it allows you to input the property address. It'll get an instant valuation. So it's not like a Zestimate, because a Zestimate, let's say you have a house that, I don't know, is built in 1986, and then it was a 2-bed, 3-bath, 1,000 square feet. But so it's going to give you the valuation based on that data, and you as an owner cannot modify any of that, whether you upgraded it or put, extra bathroom or land, whatever. The app allows you to make the adjustment in order. It's kind of like when you're doing a BPO for a bank, right? So it'll allow you to make the adjustment, and then based on that, it'll tell you, based on the location of the property, whether that particular market is cold, warm, hot. And under that, it'll tell you how many actives. It's kind of like a hot sheet on the go, but for every particular property. That we're finding is helping us a lot when speaking to your point, these 5, 7, $10 million people. So yesterday, an associate of mine, she has a property that's on the market, and I think they're listed at 19 million. She's been wanting to get a price adjustment. Now, if you look at comps in the area, the comps show that it's worth 18. But given that she saw how quote unquote cold the market is in the area, that particular owner, when she saw that, she agreed to make an adjustment to 15.5. which I think is a big adjustment. So essentially our conversation was, the comps, do they show that you could get 18? Sure, you could get 18, maybe even 19. But if you want to sell now, the market's cold right now. So it depends on what you want to do. Are you willing to wait 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever, to get your price, or do you want to transact right now? That's how we're kind of approaching it right now, because we're trying to take it from different angles as well. Because obviously in the super high end, these people don't necessarily need to sell.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're, pardon my French, they're bitching and whining, but it's like their third or fourth home.
Like that's a good price reduction, and chances are it will attract multiple offers if you go deep enough. I don't know if you remember the story of how I sold my own house, but I listed it. I called for offers in 4 days, as is where is. I posted the appraisal and the documents. I listed 20% under appraisal with a pre-inspection. I had 223 people through a house in a weekend. That's in a market where even in 2022, like your max might have been 30 people might have looked at a house before you got multiple offers. But you might consider you've heard me talk about this many times, like use more of a commercial strategy and lower your price below what the seller's willing to take. And they have to buy it. They obviously have to understand your price strategy and trust you. But list low to generate the interest, call for offers, do not respond to a single agent, don't play the game. It pisses them off, but you're a fiduciary to the seller, not the other agent. But you can create, in a market like this, you can create a frenzy with price strategy. And the biggest part of that strategy is do not respond to any offers. And when the agents call, just be like, listen, if your client didn't make the best offer, that's going to affect them Friday evening. You've got until then to amend the offer if they were playing games, because my seller's not. We're here to sell a house this week, so make your best offer. And
so you take full control like that. I love that.
I mean, they will push their buyers into ridiculous prices. My house ended up selling over appraisal. Like I think it appraised for 280, or no, it appraised for 220. I listed it for 320. I listed it for 280 and sold it for 326, and she ate the $6,000 over the appraisal. Didn't
I
even
love that strategy, actually.
It worked well. I tracked it for when our market was frozen on the bottom in 2012. I was putting flips on the market, and I was going deep into them. I was doing really quality, like heavy capex. So I was premium pricing because I was ripping out walls. I was doing heavy rehabs. So this strategy came out of me trying to push the comps in every neighborhood I ever flipped a house in. And I every zip code that I did flips in, I set the high comps. But that I used it on my own properties first. And what I figured out tracking that over a 4-year period is I would list on average 15% under what I believed they would sell for. And I would get about, I think it was 14.8% over that. So I ended up surprising myself. I'm like, yeah, I need 200. So I'm going to list it at, at 180. I would end up selling it for 2.25.
How does that conversation with a seller go when you present that strategy?
Yeah. So for me, it was somewhere along the lines of, hey, Fed, I'm really honored that you considered me to sell your house. I'm going to just be upfront and tell you that this conversation is going to be a lot different than the others you've had or will have. Is it okay if I tell you what you need to hear, not necessarily what you want to hear? So if you can trust me on this, and I'll back it up with some data, I have a pricing strategy that differentiates me from my peers, my competitors. But more importantly, it differentiates my clients from the marketplace. I might have five agents I'm competing with to sell this house. You have 5,000 houses that you're competing with to sell this house. So if you can, I'm going to lay out a price strategy that I use on my own real estate, dispositions. And I'd like to hear what you think about it. I want to remind you that you're in control as the seller. You can say no to any offer. You don't have to sign anything anyone puts in front of you. You understand that, right? Cool. So here's how it works. And then I just lay it out. And I'm like, so your worst case scenario is we're going to spend 5 days tolerating a massive amount of showings and activity. And I'm going to take a lot of heat as an agent. I'm going to get a lot of inquiries. But at the end of that 5 days, and not until the end of that 5 days, you and I are going to sit down and we'll have the reality of your situation. And if you say no, that's fine. You have no obligation. We can, if you want, we can even take the home off the market if my strategy doesn't work. And that's how I would pitch it. And they would be like, you know what? Let's go. Let's try it.
But I like that because you're giving them like a short window to attempt it. I love that. That's actually really, really.
Let's see in the next 5 days if I can take all the stress away from you. That if I can take 90 days of stress and overthinking, I can solve this in 5 days with a new price strategy.
Yeah, that's huge.
It works good for expireds too. If someone sat for 100 days and 180 days and didn't get offers, didn't get showings, that's a super easy close on those.
That's why mainly target. So I'm definitely going to have to borrow that from you. Thank you very much. Chad, I'm going to have to email you because I realized I owe you an email about I think you were talking about I think it's called a Nevis Trust, I believe.
Yeah. International Asset Protection Trust.
Yeah, I'll have to email you about that. And then on a completely different situation, I wanted to ask you or anyone on the call. I have a client who his mother owns a home. She added him to the title about a year ago so that he could pull cash out for his business. Long story short, he kind of got in trouble, so they got some notice of defaults, all that stuff, and they ended up doing some type of refinancing through I don't know who. But in the meantime, the mom's friend, who's a realtor, told his mother, let's list the house for sale. Now, mind you, there's 2 people on title. He says no. He, the son, says no to this realtor. And 2 days ago, this realtor places the property on the market. So it's live now, which I think it's first of all, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure that there's no way to transfer the title anyways, unless he signs off on it. But B, I think it's a huge disservice because now where we could have created like a little bit of an off-market kind of quote unquote war with developers and all that stuff, now it's on the market and some want to get involved in that. But from and I understand that obviously I'm not an attorney, and I know you may tell me to refer to an attorney. I just wanted to know, based on your experience, what course of action could he take moving forward? Because this realtor is clearly, I don't think she's thinking of the mother's best interest. Because like from a fiduciary duty point of view, you should not be listing something if it's not bilaterally executed.
But it's still legal in most states. Like in most states, you need one person on title to have a legally binding listing agreement. You cannot transfer title.
Right.
So it won't close. The realtor's likely wasting her time and damaging her reputation. So all he has to do is nothing to protect his interest.
He could just call title, no?
What's that?
And find out. Maybe he could just call title and find out. Because I also found out that they open a prelim. They order the prelim on the property.
Yeah, I mean, he can call the title company and say, "Hey, I'm not signing on that. Just so you guys know, you can let the agent know that this isn't a sellable asset because I won't sign."
Right. That's crazy.
And
yeah, I mean,
that real estate agent has just wasted everyone's time and money.
Right. I found that insane since she's been in business for 30 years now, and I found it extremely unethical. Since she knows the son doesn't want to sell. Anyways, but that's that. Thank you for giving me so much time.
Does he want to keep the property? What's his motive? Let me ask a better question. What's his motivation to keep the property?
So my understanding is that because he just refinanced or was able to pull some cash out of the property, there is a prepayment penalty, a pretty hefty prepayment penalty if they sell in the first 6 months. So in his eyes, it's let's wait the 6 months and do it later if we need it.
Let's make him more money. You go to the agent and say, "Here's the deal. We will do a lease with option to purchase," and both people will sign that.
Right.
But
okay.
you're not getting rent credits. Like you went against, like you have a fiduciary responsibility to both of these people. You chose half of that and you ignored his needs. Not illegal, but certainly not good business. So here's the deal. You can go find a buyer for the house. They can rent it for the next 6 months because this guy's not going to incur the pain of the prepayment penalty. So you got it on the market. Not like you started this, so go amend your strategy and find a lease option purchaser.
Well, I like that. Yes, because it's best if they're kind of in trouble. So I think it'd be best if they could just just get more money out of it.
Yeah, if they're using HELOCs for business lines of credit, they're in trouble.
I don't think it was that, but I'll find out. I'll look further into it. He just kind of called me freaking out yesterday. I was like, all right, I need the whole story before I can try to help you. But all I can tell you is that agent was not acting very ethically, but it is what it is.
Yeah. So what is your role in this? Just being a helpful guy, because the listing agent already has the property listed, right?
Yeah, this is just like a really close friend of mine. He was actually trying to list with me. I was only going to do this to help him out.
Yeah.
Probably not even going to charge him full transparency, just because I know that they're kind of in deep water right now, and they're trying to come back up for air. So I was just trying to figure out a way.
If you're not going to take a commission on it, then I would just coach him through how to tell the current listing agent how to do their job right.
Right.
And say, listen, this economically harms me. If you think I'm signing anything in the next 6 months, you're crazy unless it's a lease with option to purchase and no rent credit. And we'll use the rent to pay the mortgage, and we want an above market rent or certainly above that mortgage payment.
Right.
and then we can close in 180 days.
Okay.
I've done
I'll
them like
find out
that.
and I'll circle back with you.
It wasn't
I
for
think that'll be
prepayment
interesting.
penalties. It was more for known job transfers. But I've gone ahead and put homes on the market, and I've done lease backs that way too.
Mhm.
But sell it with a 180-day closing date, or sell it as a lease with option to purchase, and you have 6 months to exercise the option. That's better for the seller.
Okay. I'll present these to him, and then I will circle back to you.
Okay.
Appreciate you always. Thank you so much.
Thanks for being here, Fed. All right,
Thank
guys.
you.
We are after the hour. John had to take off already. Thanks for everybody that participated this episode. If you're not already, make sure you become a member of the Facebook group Market Makers Weekly Mastermind, and we'll post these episodes and the calculators and any other giveaways in that group. If it happens to be your first call, go check out the group and look at the past calls. We've got 2 free courses in the group that are pinned right now. All you have to do is just sign up, enroll in them, and go. And plenty of other things. We give away something every week. So thanks for your time, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you.
Thank you.